Hello and welcome to Entirely English. And I want you to imagine that it's a Sunday afternoon. You're preparing dinner and you realize you've run out of one ingredient, maybe milk. You're out of milk. So you rush off to the supermarket. And when you get there at 4:15, the shutters are down, the lights are off, it's closed. You're locked out. Why? Because of a legal battle that has been raging in Britain for thousands of years. Long before we had the modern supermarket, way back in the mists of time, there's been a battle about what you could do on a Sunday. And it involved medieval kings, political renegades, who even banned walking on a Sunday, to undercover council operatives, an historic political mutiny that threw Thatcher over, and a legendary legal loophole that meant while you couldn't buy a sofa on a Sunday, you could buy an orange for £299. This isn't just an annoying weekend quirk. It's a story about how a nation fought over its soul, its wallet, and its day of rest. So let's have a look at the bizarre history of British Sunday trading. To understand why Sundays became locked down, we have to start with the Middle Ages. And ironically, back then, Sunday was not the quiet, calm day we know today. In the Middle Ages, Sunday was actually the biggest trading day of the week. You see, the average medieval peasant worked their fields for 6 days a week, or more correctly, the fields of their feudal lord for 6 days a week. On Sunday, they're expected to go to church, and they realized that Sunday morning was the one time of the week that all of the people in the district were gathered in one place, the church. So these medieval enterprising farmers and merchants realized they had a captive audience. They didn't bother setting up a marketplace close to the church. They did it right outside the church, sometimes within the grounds of the church. They'd set up their little tables and their produce and sell it to all the people who were coming and going. So this was a chaotic, loud, rowdy mix of people hawking their wares and the church service. And they had livestock there, cows, the pigs, sheep. They were shouting, "Come over here, buy my potatoes," all that sort of thing, and a lot of heavy drinking. As you can imagine, the church absolutely hated this. The bishops argued that the noise of the bleating sheep and the people hawking their wares was defiling the Sabbath and obviously taking people away from the church. They should be in church worshipping, and they're outside buying bits of bacon and drinking beer. In 1448, the crown eventually got involved. King Henry VI passed a royal decree banning all fairs and markets from trading on a Sunday at all. And that was bad enough. But then we had the Puritans. I've discussed those in previous videos. In the 17th century, when Cromwell and his Puritanical cronies took over, they didn't like any sort of enjoyment on a Sunday. They thought Sunday should be very strict, very devout, but very depressing. And they didn't just ban shopping. They banned sports. They banned walking for pleasure outside. They banned drinking in a pub. They banned anything which was not connected to devoutly studying your Bible, praying. Essentially, Sunday became a day of enforced national silence. And thankfully, as you'll know if you've watched the previous videos, the puritanical regime didn't last very long, and soon King Charles II returned to the throne. So the British people got their football and their pubs back. But the rules about trading on the Sunday stayed. No trading on a Sunday. In 1677, Parliament passed the Lord's Day Observance Act, which explicitly stated that no person could do or exercise any worldly labour on the Sabbath. And the penalties were severe. If you opened your store on a Sunday, local constables would physically grab your produce, your stock, sell it, and the money would be given to poor people in the community. So there's kind of good and bad thing there. You break the law and the punishment helps the poor. So nobody would actually risk that, because we're talking about all of your stock would be sold. And for nearly 3 centuries, this rule stood, keeping the shutters closed on every shop in Britain on a Sunday. And then we entered the Victorian era, where the Industrial Revolution was in full flow. It had completely transformed the country. The nature of work had completely changed, but the 1677 law had not. Factory workers were doing a grueling 12 to 14 hours work a day, 6 days a week. They needed their Sunday's rest. But they also faced a crisis. If you're working 12 to 14 hours a day, when do you go shopping? When do you buy your food? Naturally, on your day off, the Sunday, but the shops are closed. They're stuck. So what this created was this sort of chaotic, frantic, late-night Saturday shopping. The workers would rush to the shops directly from work on a Saturday night, trying to buy everything they could to last a week. And they'd be buying essentially the leftovers that the other people who didn't work in factories had left. So the meat, which was on the turn, milk, which was going sour. It wasn't good quality stuff they were buying. And we had to get all of this stuff before the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of Sunday. Now, church leaders fought tooth and nail to keep the law in place, to stop shops being allowed to open on a Sunday. Part of that was for fear that unscrupulous business owners would force their workers to work 7 days a week with no rest. And we know in the Bible, the instruction is you work for 6, you rest on the 7th day. So the church leaders were very adamant that people had to have that day off. But it's a swings and roundabouts thing. They have the day off, but they can't buy anything. If the laws change that shops can open, businesses can trade on a Sunday, then they're going to have to work then and they won't be able to buy anything as well. So it's a complete nightmare. And it was that way for a while. Let's fast forward to the middle of the 20th century. And Parliament realised the 1677 Act was old, ancient, out of date, out of touch with modern people. So they tried to change it with the Shops Act of 1950. The idea was to keep Sunday peaceful, but to allow the sale of perishable goods. That's food that will rot, like your meat. Couldn't last from Saturday through to Monday, so you could sell it on a Sunday. So they said you could sell perishable goods and emergency goods on a Sunday. And what this actually did was create an absolute absurdity. The legal loopholes, rings you had to jump through, were insane. So, for example, under this 1950 law, a newsagent can sell magazines but not books. So on a Sunday, you could go to your local newsagent and buy Playboy, but you couldn't buy the Bible. Weird. And you could buy gin and tonic in the pub, but you couldn't buy gin from the off license. And this perishable thing, you could buy clotted cream, but you couldn't buy. So for 40 years, retailers had to navigate this bizarre minefield of what you could and couldn't sell legally. Constantly terrified of being prosecuted for selling the wrong vegetables on a Sunday. Between the 1970s and 1980s, this whole thing completely fractured. So at this time, we had a lot of Southern Asians coming into the country from India, Pakistan, that sort of thing. And many of them, as family units, they'd buy small shops, we call them corner shops. And the clash came with these people who were Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs. Sunday wasn't their Sabbath. They have a fierce work ethic, businesses to build, and their local communities desperately needed produce, things like milk, on the Sundays. And they couldn't just quietly stay open on a Sunday. They were under a cloud of constant legal warfare. Local councils would send out undercover enforcement officers on a Sunday morning to stage sting operations on these little shopkeepers. So they'd walk into the corner shop and they'd buy their milk, fine, but then maybe they buy some carrots. And because they bought that and it's not classed as a perishable, click. These people are arrested, they're hit with court summonses, and these small businesses were often hit with crushing penalties, huge fines, just essentially for providing a service to their neighbours. Now, this street-level conflict caught the attention of the Prime Minister at the time, Margaret Thatcher. Now, she was a fierce believer in the free market. Now, she didn't want to tweak the law to offer some little compromise. She wanted to blow the whole thing wide open. In late 1985, her government produced a bill that called for the total, absolute, unrestricted deregulation of Sunday trading. No safety nets, no hourly limits. Any shop in the country could stay open as long as they wanted, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, Thatcher had a massive 140-seat majority in Parliament, and so she assumed her bill would sail through. She was wrong. Her radical free market ideology collided violently with her party's traditional and conservative values. A massive, roaring coalition formed overnight, called the Keep Sunday Special campaign. The church argued that deregulation would destroy family life. Trade unions argued that deregulation would mean that their workers would be exploited and forced to work 7 days a week. And ironically, these independent corner shops hated the bill too. Think about it. Under the old messy law, they could survive because the big supermarkets had to close. If this new bill had gone through, the supermarkets would open. They wouldn't stand a chance. They would be undercut in price. People would go to the supermarket and not pay the corner shop high prices. It would be instant death for the corner shop. On the 14th of April 1986, the bill went to the vote at midnight. Thatcher ordered her PMs to vote for the bill. But in a stunning betrayal, 72 members of her cabinet voted against the bill. It was a massive mutiny. It was supposedly Thatcher's most embarrassing, humiliating defeat in the 11 years of her premiership. Now, because she was so badly bruised by this 1986 defeat, her government decided they were never going to touch Sunday trading again. And that left the country in a bizarre legal vacuum for 8 years. But the demand for Sunday trading didn't go away. And in the big DIY stores like B&Q, garden centres, furniture shops, they wanted Sunday trading. But how could they open without getting shut down instantly? So what they did was they looked closely at the old Shops Act, specifically looking at this loophole that allowed the sale of perishable goods. So by that law, you're allowed to sell, for example, fresh fruit, some vegetables, milk on a Sunday. You couldn't sell a sofa. You couldn't sell a wheelbarrow. But these corporate giants looked at the bill and had a sudden malicious, genius brainwave. It didn't say anywhere that a shop only had to sell food. It didn't say that the shop was only a greengrocer's, only sold fruit and vegetables. It just said that fruit and vegetables could be sold. So giant furniture shops, for example, started putting boxes of apples and oranges in their shops, which meant they could open and people could come in and look around at the furniture and plan to buy. Oh, this is a nice sofa. We'll order it. We'll pay for it on Monday. That sort of thing. But then they had another little schemy idea. So they were allowed to open on a Sunday because they stocked fruit and vegetables to sell. And people could look and sit on the sofas, lie on the beds, see what they liked. That wasn't enough. So they had this really cunning plan. They would put an orange on a sofa and they say, this orange is £299. Buy this orange, get this sofa free. It's obviously a scheme, but legally they were selling the orange. The sofa was a free gift that went with it. And try as they might, the government couldn't touch them. The receipt, the paperwork, the legal paperwork, it all said that an orange had been sold. Nothing about a sofa. And the sale of the orange on a Sunday was permissible because it is perishable. So by 1994, the entire legal system about Sunday trading was a laughingstock. To end the street-level council raids and the absurd retail tricks, Thatcher's replacement, John Major, finally passed the Sunday Trading Act of 1994. This law created the exact compromise that governs British trading now, defining shops by their floor space. Small shops under 280 square meters, 3,000 square feet, were allowed to set their own hours. They could open 24/7. It didn't matter. They were free to trade as they liked. Larger shops, bigger than 280 square meters, supermarkets, for example, were capped at a maximum of 6 hours opening on a Sunday. So this was great for the independent retailer. Not great because they still have that competition from the supermarkets on a Sunday for that limited time, Sunday evening. You want milk, you've got to go to the corner shop, the little independent retailer. Not all of them are independent now. We have a lot of these corner shops, which are branches of the bigger shops. So we have Tesco Express and places like that. They are small branches of the big supermarkets. So what that means is that on a Sunday, our supermarkets tend to be open from 10 in the morning till 4. And additionally, they're also banned from opening on Christmas Day or Easter Sunday. So that long, dramatic, 1,000-year history is the reason we have our strange trading laws now. It's why our supermarkets are not open after 4 o'clock on a Sunday. So if you're ever visiting Britain, do be aware, 4 till 6 on Sunday. And it also affects how we trade on a bank holiday. Why do massive supermarkets and department stores open on Sunday hours on a Monday, bank holiday Monday? To understand that, we need to look at a brilliant Victorian banker who loved cricket and, surprisingly, hated his staff being overworked, and by accident invented our 3-day weekend. So hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss that. That's the next video about bank holidays. Please like and subscribe, and hope to see you there.